Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining another CRM COE event. And today it's going to be an exciting session with Ian Goetz and Vernon Keenan. Both of them are well-versed with the topic that we are going to discuss today. So my name is Veda Pulani, and I'm the founder of CRMCOE.com. I work for a company called HESC as an executive director and head of Salesforce Platform Services. And I have two guests from two companies, Ian and Vernon. I would like to introduce Ian, and Ian is well known in the industry, but instead of me speaking about Ian, I would like Ian to speak a little bit about his background.
Oh, hi there. So first of all, thank you for inviting me to come along. As you said, I've been around Salesforce a while. In fact, I've been around 21 years, which I guess means I'm officially allowed to drink now. I'm now the there's an ISV called Elements.cloud. So we're a change intelligence platform, I think is what the industry analysts call the area we're in. I'm the CEO and founder there. So delighted to be spending time here talking about DevOps, which is an area close to my heart. One of the things you asked us before the show was, like, is there one thing that people don't know about me? Well, if you look up there, I play bass in a cover band. So that's what I do in my spare time.
Thank you, Ian. How about you, Vernon?
Well, thank you, Velu. I'm so excited to be here to share knowledge and to help people understand about DevOps and CRM. And I've been around the ecosystem a while. I was actually knew Mark Benioff when I was at Oracle in the mid-90s and worked at Salesforce early on in the very earliest days, run my own company using Salesforce. And recently I've stepped back into an analyst role where I've kind of looked at Salesforce DevOps as a research topic. And to do that, I've written a lot of blog articles on my website. And I've also talked about, we're going to show it the map and some of the companies that have done DevOps products. I do a lot of curating of DevOps activities for my readers.
Great. Thank you, Vernon. I'm so excited to have you both in this panel. And so the purpose of this event today is to educate the CRM COE leaders and the CRM system owners or product owners the importance of the CRM DevOps and the maturity. So that's going to be the theme tonight or this evening or afternoon, wherever you are. So I'm sure this is going to be a fun event. So today's discussion, we'll just go through quickly on the overview. And then when we talk about the DevOps, we just want to make sure that we all understand the definition of Salesforce or CRM definition, the DevOps benefits, the challenges that we all face in the DevOps world, and application lifecycle management, and then obviously as a CRM COE leader, what's the action list for you? So when you go through this, the presentation at the end, we will also discuss about the action list. So before we get started, if you have any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat window. And if you have your phones, please mute yourselves so it doesn't get recorded. Thank you in advance. So we'll get started. As we all know, CRM is growing pretty consistent, 30% year over year. And as you see, 91% of the companies, 91% of top performing orgs have some kind of COE. I don't know whether it's a formal COE or well established or just for very, very in the initial stage, but they do have a form of COE. And as you see, the buzzword here is the low code. There are people, the organizations is focused more on the low code enterprise application. And then at the same time, DevOps provides a good change governance. So we will talk about that. And as we see here, DevOps is a journey, and you go through the journey to reach the maturity level. So that's the level set that we want to keep it for today. But I just would like to get Ian's opinion or his point of view. Ian, what happens if you don't have a formal COE to the organization?
I think if you don't have a COE, then it doesn't stop you necessarily implementing Salesforce and getting the benefits, but I think it just becomes more expensive because there are more missed steps. But I think that as the size of your implementation, either the scope and the complexity of your Salesforce implementation, the number of integration points with other systems, or if you're moving to multiple orgs, suddenly the opportunity to have missteps, to have miscommunication, for things to fall between the gaps becomes increasingly often. And therefore, there's a sort of a maturity curve, I think, even with the COE, that the more mature, the more complex, the more integrated your Salesforce system is, suddenly you need a center of excellence, which starts to draw together some of those strands. And there becomes a point when actually it's just so inefficient without some sort of central governance. But I think in the early stages, maybe you can get away with it. But I think you'll see as we talk a little bit longer through the session, the earlier you get these things in place, the easier it is to start to establish those best practices as you grow.
Thank you for sharing, Ian. I echo that. I've been working in this industry for about 21 years, as you are in Salesforce. I started using Salesforce in 2000, June 13th. That's when I got my first access to Salesforce. In fact, that was a free instance for 1 full year for 5 licenses. So I don't think anybody gets it today. But the last 5 years.
Did you know Mark personally back then, though?
No, that was the deal. You could have as many Force.com licenses as you want for free forever in the early days.
And I don't want to go there, but I have a lot of stories to tell. But in the last 5 years, I've been working in the area of COE. I've helped a lot of companies. And I agree and echo your thoughts, Ian, in terms of what happens if you don't have one. Currently, I work for a company, very large organization with several thousand users, multiple orgs. Having a formal COE, we see that there is a big value. And I have numbers to show, and I can show the business benefits realization of what happens when you have a COE, what happens when you don't have one. And over the last two years of running the CRM COE, I have noticed several COE leaders and offline, online, we've been talking the benefits of having COE, and thank you for sharing that. So now the next big buzzword, I wouldn't call it buzzword. I think it's a real, even a large organization like where I'm working, the low code is a big initiative that companies do take. So in your experience, Vernon, I go full name, can you help us to define the low code development? What is the definition of low code development, so that the people who are going to be listening in, they will have a common understanding about the low code?
Sure. So I think you can roughly divide coders, so to speak, into high code and low code. That's one way to divide them. And essentially, to me, it's like, do they use VS Code or not? Are they using just a graphical user interface, like a flow, for example, to define their environment? And to me, that's a low code developer. And I have a different word for them, for that class of user. I call them business creators. So they're essentially this explains the reason why Salesforce is growing so rapidly, and how other SaaS products are growing so rapidly, is that you have these big tools with big functionality that people have learned how to hook together now just with a mouse. So that is where the labor is actually coming from right now in terms of people creating solutions. And I think that's translated into a demand for a platform where low code is usable and complete. And that's Salesforce for sure, with the flows and the other things like DevOps Center and other stuff that's out there that just makes the platform usable by admin types, which I prefer to call business creators.
I agree with you on that, Vern. Ian, in your, I think you and I are kind of buried into Salesforce or the CRM systems for the last 31 years. I do hear some other tools out there. Salesforce or any CRM is not the low-code platform. I wonder, have you come across any other low-code platforms that compete with products like Salesforce? And I haven't. I heard one like a UiPath, but I wonder whether any other platforms or tools out there as a low-code platform for big enterprises.
I don't think anybody is really can really compete with Salesforce around the customer-centric view of low-code. So think of low-code as Vern said, as a way of actually enabling a business developer, a citizen developer, a business creator, however you want to define it. So they don't actually need to understand how to code. But by the way, they need to understand how systems are architected. That's a different conversation completely. Right. But many of these low-code applications are driven around a particular use case. Salesforce is around CRM. But if you look at, say, integrations, there are quite a lot of low-code integration platforms now. I'm not sure you count MuleSoft as one of those, maybe you would, but if you think about in the sort of the more consumer end of it, Zapier or Integromat, which Salon is for. So you can pick a particular industry area and go, all right, for this industry, and then what's happened is they've all layered on top of it a low-code interface, which means that a lot of the heavy lifting, a lot of that can be done very easily by a citizen developer. And they all give you hooks behind the scenes so you can go and code if you need to. But the aim is to make as much of that functionality available through a low-code interface. And again, if you looked at some other areas, whether if it was just pure web design, then again, someone like WordPress, you don't need to understand HTML, you drag and drop. So low-code is this sort of platform concept that's overlaid on top of any application. Salesforce is the dominant player in CRM, but because of force.com, of course, you can build anything, which is obviously a benefit, but it's also a bit of a curse unless you actually think about how you architect it.
I agree. It's a curse at the same time. It's a dangerous, even though it's a low-code platform, you can mess things up and you can mess it up such a way that it's very hard to recover or even undo. There are companies who have done it. In my experience, I've rebuilt platforms or instances because they couldn't do it anymore. They can't even grow it anymore. So you have to redo it, and that happens. So one thing that today, as we are moving forward, if you noticed it, we don't talk about why DevOps. If you are going to be questioning yourself, do I need a DevOps? Probably you need to think yourself whether you are the right. You maybe have to do some soul searching and say, why not DevOps? So we are not going to even talk about why DevOps. I think we all agree that DevOps is mandatory environment that you have to have, a platform that you have to have successfully to run your CRM product or a platform. So we are going to go directly into the definition of DevOps. What does this mean? And so I would like, even though I've been in the ecosystem for a long period, for the last few years, I have been focused on establishing DevOps, bringing people together, buying the tools, putting the process together and delivering value. But we strategically think, but operate tactically, because we don't have time for us to go back to the strategy because we are so busy with all the tactical every day. You have to deliver, you have to fix the problems, you have to upgrade your tools, you have to change your processes. But those things are not necessarily adding value to the business. It may be adding value to the project because you're delivering on time, but are you delivering in the right time to the right people where you see the end result, the benefit? So I would like, Vernon, you speak to this slide. Certainly you are an industry expert or an analyst, and I would like to get your view on the definition, and then after that, Ian. So Vernon, do you want to speak?
Sure. Well, I think the first thing to say about DevOps is that it is a mushy definitional term in that it's tend to cover more than its original meaning defined about 10 or 15 years ago, which is the unification of developer activities with operational activities. So that's still one of the original philosophies of DevOps was to break down silos, to increase communication. So I think that part is there, but now, for me, what DevOps means is everything to do about enterprise application delivery in the Salesforce environment, in the CRM environment. And fortunately, because DevOps is a well-developed subject in other areas of computer application development, we can kind of look at that. And I've done that to create this map, this kind of layered map about what you need to have covered within DevOps. So there's 10 categories. So that's actually quite a few categories. And I'll just go into a few of them here to kind of focus on what the important ones are. Because if you're just getting started with DevOps, you're right. You're in the muck. You want to try to make things easier. You want to try to get automation running. You want to try to pull your head out of the muck. But first, you got to deal with the muck. And that's what we do a lot in Salesforce, because Salesforce is complex. Not only are the metadata types extensive and like, for example, Ian's company, Elements Cloud, has proprietary methods to go in there and figure out what all the metadata is inside of your org. So there's like secret ways that go into the org and figure it out. So it's really quite complex. And to get all that stuff organized in a way so that you can manage, do release management, do change management, understand what you're doing with your org is really complex. And that's why you need a product usually like Capado, AutoRabbit, Blue Canvas, GearSet, who else am I leaving off here? Flowsum, Opsera, and Prodly. So those are the top 7 platform service providers. And by the way, you can find a list of all those on my website under the gallery. So what we do is we focus a lot in this blue area, this map here, but you got to start pulling your head out of the muck. And the first step in that is to implement what I call a command server, or something that you can run somewhere to implement your pipeline and do orchestration. Now, all the products I mentioned earlier have command servers built into them, or CI/CD capability. That's another way people talk about command servers. And then system reliability and incident management. You got to understand what's going on inside of your org. That's an area also where there's very few products. But to me, if you're concerned about being stuck in release management, stuck in just the battles of trying to go faster, I think you do need to pull your head out of the muck and think about application lifecycle management, because this is basically the project management skills and all the things you need to do in order to help move your projects along in an efficient way and know what you're going to build better. So I think I'm going to turn the conversation over about what is DevOps and what is release management, how do we work with it, to Ian now, because his product fits in perfectly as kind of the management overview you can have to your CRM system.
Thanks, Vern. Again, rather than talk about the product per se, I want to just talk about the principles first of all, which is it's very easy to think about DevOps, as you said, which is about release, it's the build test piece, and I think application lifecycle management actually talks to the level of almost the platform owner who said, okay, I'm writing a check for Salesforce. It could be hundreds of thousands, or it could be 5 tens of millions of dollars. And there's a huge opportunity to exploit that platform. Hugely powerful. You see case study after case study of what you can do with Salesforce. But you need to be focused on how I get the right objectives, which turns into the right requirements, which turns into the right user stories. So as in, are we building the right thing to then enable everything in the blue boxes that you just talked about, Vern, which is the ability to actually drive an efficient and effective development machine. And I think quite often people think of DevOps as being all of that, but then when they get to the products, it's about build and release. And I think as an application lifecycle management, you need to take an overall view. So clearly Elements is there trying to fill in the gap around, I know, the business analysis piece, the org analysis. But we shouldn't forget also Salesforce's initiatives around, say, well-architected, where they're trying to encourage people to get out of the muck and start going, okay, before you start building another wall, actually, where should the walls be? I mean, fine. Are we building a 2-story house or a 1-story house? If we're building a 2-story house, can we please design the stairs before we finish building? So I think there are a lot of initiatives trying to drag people higher up to think about the overall architecture, think about the business analysis. That means that then DevOps can do what it does really well, which is actually to build stuff quickly, build it accurately, make sure that it gets released we reduce the amount of effort to get things through the release cycle, but then confident that they're releasing the right things.
Right, and I think so. And you have your teams doing that. So we've moved our way up through the green layer of this diagram, and now we're getting into the gold, which I think really matters. And for the COE crowd, I think this is the thing that we need to provide leadership for to your constituency. So to think ultimately, what is the good of what we're doing? Can you translate what you're doing into a key performance indicator? Can you identify even revenue streams or stakeholder satisfaction streams or other types of ways to directly tie your developer activity into something that's tangible for the outcome of the company? Not only is that going to increase, your ability to have importance or let's say influence as a COE, if you're actually able to see what you're doing. I think that this is also a way to provide leadership up and down the whole ladder to provide inspiration as to what are we actually doing this for.
So,
and Velu, surely that's where if you think about the stuff that what you've been building over the last 5 years, that's where everything you've talked to me about, that's where you've actually added that value. It's not about can we move some bits through the system more quickly, but are we doing it the right way?
So one thing that what kind of concerns me, Ian, if you remember, I don't know how much you remember back, because we've been in the ecosystem for a long time. 15 years ago, when we started implementing Salesforce, I would say about 10 to 12 years ago, it used to be the implementation before even we talk about the DevOps. It used to take a shorter life cycle from inception to go to production. They call it quick start. Salesforce had a quick start. It takes 2 days, 5 days. Just go talk to the business owners, business community, and okay, what you want? You want lead accounts, contact opportunity? Boom, give me the data in Excel sheet, load it, put it, send it, and have them start using the system in a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe maximum month. But as we progressed, we see all this blue box, green and yellow. My question is, this system became so complex that the value from beginning to go live, by the time you go live, you get tired, you're overwhelmed, even though you have all the tools. That's how I feel it, because I've come from that background. When I speak with business leaders, they just want to get things moving. But now we have this DevOps concept. We have a tool, we have the business analyst and Jira and all those things. It takes forever to go to the production. So my question to something that we need to contemplate. The CRM leaders also should think, what is happening? Are we increasing the complexity in the name of DevOps? Or as a CRM COE leader, by looking at this, what should they be focused so that they can show the value without tiring the delivery folks or the architects? So that's where personally I'm going through it, and I'm pretty sure the COE leaders will have similar mind. Okay, am I increasing the complexity? So what's your thought on it? Just curiosity.
Well, okay, but you think back to, I don't know when it came in, but 2005, 2007, we didn't even have sandboxes. So there wasn't a need for DevOps because there was only production. You put it straight into production. But you've also got to bear in mind, the scope of what the problems people are solving were fairly narrow. And therefore, absolutely, it's easy to solve that problem. Salesforce is now solving a way bigger problem. And it being rather unfair, it's almost naive of a business user to go, well, hang on, this is really simple. No, your business is quite complicated. If you place an order on a website, which is expected to make it into Salesforce, which is then going through CPQ, which then gets delivered as an order, that's complex. It has a lot of moving parts. It also has a lot of risk associated with it. So the trick is a balance, I think, of agility versus governance, which is we need to put enough governance in there to make sure we don't break stuff, because they'll be even more upset if we break things and stuff doesn't work. But we actually need to make sure we overlay agility. And some ways of doing that are putting some automation in, making sure that we leverage some of the technology to make sure that what would have been done manually, we can now do automatically. But it's also, I think, coaching the business users into which things are complex and take time, and therefore manage their expectations, but versus some things can be done quickly because we know they're lower risk, because we can put them through a pipeline more quickly. So not everything has to have a 6-month time frame. Some things can be put through in 6 hours. But again, it's understanding what those differences are. And I think that's the level of maturity that people are starting to go through. We went from no DevOps, but we got away with it. We're now getting to a situation where complexity means we need DevOps. But then I think there's a level of maturity you need to get through, which is understanding how to drive DevOps, leverage automation, so we can actually get some of that agility back in without losing the level of governance that we absolutely need as IT professionals.
Yeah, I think I'd like to add to that, one thing I found in my research and looking at the companies who are providing DevOps services and the companies who need DevOps services definitely fall into a kind of 2 categories right now. For me, are the top ones, which are the ones that absolutely need it for some reason because they have a critical application. And by critical application, I mean regulated, probably. So like they could have financial application, so they need SOX compliance, or they could be using life sciences applications to collect clinical research data. And you could be using nCino to be running a bank. So in those situations, people are willing to do all the extra stuff that goes into DevOps. They're the ones that I just described, are the ones who need to hit all 10 categories here. And then I think there's another group of DevOps users which can benefit so much from just small increments of the stuff that we're doing right now, compared to what a complete DevOps user goes for. But I think a COE needs to pay attention to that, like which orgs are the ones that are going to be subject to regulation. Is it like, oops, we all of a sudden have to put SOX compliance on this org, or that kind of thing? I think that's the type of governance that you're looking for. And when you run across those situations, that's the time to marshal resources to do things like sandboxes and to use them and to have rigorous procedures for development. Because if you don't, a regulator is going to complain about it.
I guess we can talk about this for forever. That's how I understand. But I don't think there is no going back if you have a DevOps. It's what I understand is that we have to have a DevOps for you to be successfully deploying the speed in which you want to deploy, and make sure that you have the right processes and so on and so forth. So there is no question of whether we should have DevOps. So, and we talked about the definition. And I think as we started saying that DevOps is a journey, so when we look at the journey, I think it's a journey always starts with the first step, and then you are going all the way. There is no end, in my opinion, even though thanks to Gearset, so they are talking about DevOps as a journey and it's a maturity. As you are progressing in your journey, you will have a better maturity. And they put the people who are using the DevOps, either the tools or the processes or both automation, they have 5 buckets. So it's a very interesting perspective. So we understand the need for DevOps. I think it's a mandatory platform that you have to have. And we also have seen the definition of the DevOps. By the way, for anybody who's listening here, DevOps is a development operations. So if you say DevOps, if you want to know what that full definition is, a development operations. So you are developing at the same time you are operating in an optimized manner. So Gearset gives us a good perspective on the maturity. So my question, I think this is probably for Ian, if you have a tool like Gearset or any tool, Capado, do they come under, which category they come under? Is it still a beginner? Or if you have a tool, that means you're automatically graduating to number 3, then from there I go to 5, or you always start with 1 and then go 5. So that's where I'm like, people need to set the right expectation. I bought a tool, now I'm an expert. No, in my opinion, but what do you think?
Well, I think the first thing is, if you look at the beginner category, I think that is really, there is no DevOps. I mean, you say how mature is DevOps? You're developing to production. You probably there's no concept of release because you're developing straight into production. Okay. You may have a few sandbox. Maybe you have a sandbox, but you need to get yourself to a position where you've got a source control system. You're actually starting to think, even as a low. So I think this. So let me go back a step. When we talked about low-code developers, they are, the reason I disagree with Vern's definition of this, because I think I like to call them low-code developers, to say you're actually developers, you just happen to be a low-code platform. You're a developer, you're using coding, which means that you're a developer, you need to think about development life cycles, you need to think like a developer. That means single source code. It means committing changes to so it's getting those disciplines about that we talk about DevOps. So I think you don't have to buy a tool to get from 1 to 2. I think it's almost impossible to get beyond 2 in any practical sense, unless you're prepared to write a bunch of scripts. And then essentially you built the tools that are already on the market. And that's a straight build versus buy decision. So the first thing is, I think you need to get the right mindset to start moving through this maturity curve. That's the first thing. The second thing is, just because you bought a tool doesn't immediately mean you get to number 2, because you still need to implement it and use it using some well-established practices. I mean, even if you're using something like DevOps Center, which has just come out, it's a fairly simple replacement for change sets. And of course, over time, it will grow. But that simple change from change sets to something like DevOps Center is using GitHub behind the scenes. So it's already forcing you into box 2 in terms of some decent working practices. So it's a long answer to a simple question. Number 1, buying a tool doesn't necessarily get you to 2, 3, or 4. Actually implementing well does. Can you get beyond 2 or 3 without implementing a DevOps tool? The answer is probably not. Why would you do that? There are already tools out there. Use those, take advantage of those. Your job is to actually make your business run better, not to go and replicate tooling that's already out in the marketplace.
I thank you for clarifying that. And I can share my experience. being a user of a large service provider or a DevOps or tool platform provider, we have multiple orgs. And I worked as a consultant in many areas prior to my current role. What I have noticed here, just because you have tools, you have the processes and people are using it, it doesn't mean that you are going to be automatically graduating to 4 and 5. It is about having the measuring the right outcome from your processes and the tools, tying back that outcome to the business benefits and explaining to the executives that this is what's going on with our environment, showing them the value. I think that's what they are talking about 4 and 5. I just want to make sure that I understand correctly. Vern, what do you think? Am I understanding right? As a COE leader, that's how I would go to the executives. What's your thought?
Well, I would, I mean, I love Gearset for putting this out because it makes you think about where you're at, where you can go. So I think that's super useful. And I think what we're talking about here in stages 4 and 5 is payoff. So it's like a payoff for DevOps is time saved with your staff. That's one of the big payoffs. And I think that if you've got automated backups, you've got you're using every feature of Gearset, you're probably saving time and you've got a more complete full grip on your environment. The only thing I would add to this is I'd probably have a 6th stage, which is like in orbit or something, and that's like talking about the project management and how do we manage this whole stuff and how do we have do value stream and that kind of business. So I think that's like another stage of maturity that I'd kind of like to see. But I love this because it gets your mind in gear for what you need to do next as you're taking on DevOps.
But you said it's saved time for the development team. Yeah, it is, and it's sort of saved rework. I mean, we're seeing as much as sort of 50% rework reduction if you get this stuff done properly. But surely the real benefit is at a higher level, which is, are we getting the functionality, the changes into the hands of the business users so they can run their business better? Well, I think that's why 4 and 5 are actually, it actually gets beyond the DevOps, beyond the development management team. It's now in the executives where they're now going, we can see the overall benefits. Yes. Stages 1, 2, and 3 is about, can we make our DevOps machine work better? But actually 4 and 5 surely is about, can we make the machine work better on behalf of the overall business rather than just a sort of a slightly parochial view of DevOps.
Yeah, I went back there to I had the flash of pain that I occasionally get when I think about working with change sets and all that kind of stuff. So I was conveying, I was channeling that pain there. So that's what DevOps does for the ground the ground folks in this. But I think it really does. I think we talk about the next slide maybe. Yeah. But it's basically, I think we go back to these DORA metrics and one of the key things is time. How quickly do we get it done? If somebody's asking for something, it's in the right project plan. We know it's something that we need. It's part of the thing that's going to deliver value for my stakeholders. How quickly can I deliver that? That to me.
I agree with you, and I just want to. We have been using DevOps tool for 2 years, and one of the leaders from the top level asked me, well, hey, what's the benefit of using this? And I said, we save a lot of time, and this is benefits. Okay, so you're going to say that you're going to lay off 2 people, cut 2 people from your team? That's No, that's not acceptable.
Yeah, that's not how you
That's
say.
how the business is looking. When you say I'm saving time and I'm, so that's some number. So then that's a very basic question. I'm saving 300 hours. Okay, so you may not need 2 people. Next year, you might need, you can either deploy those 2 people to a different thing, to a different task. So these are the common questions that we
Right.
get asked.
I guess we need to avoid saying that we're saving time, but instead we're increasing performance.
But I think it's a saving time is very reasonable. I think it's valid in my opinion. But what Ian was saying, that's where I go with it. As we are maturing, you are not going to be in 4 or 5 categories unless you are showing the bottom line results. What does that mean?
Yep.
If you're a call center environment, you're talking about average call handling time, all those service cloud metrics that you're talking about. At the end of the day, how does it affect the end customer? What is that you're trying to do? Okay, there is a new innovation, new capability comes in. It used to take 7 weeks to implement. Now I can get it done in 3 weeks. Hence the customer satisfaction, NPS goes up by 2%. Hence my business is growing faster. I think that DevOps or the COE leaders should start focusing on the business outcome tied to the number 4 and 5. That's how I would do as a COE leader. I would not worry about how many story points and the velocity, how fast I do, how soon I can do, how many features I implement. It doesn't matter. If I go talk to the head of customer service, okay, I'm a number 5. That means I can show you the direct bottom line change. That's how confident I should be as a COE leader. And I don't know whether you all agree with me, but that's my confidence level for using the DevOps platform maturity. Is that fair statement, Ian and Vern?
Absolutely. I think the highest level way I can think about DevOps in an organization is that DevOps is the instrumentation of your organization.
Right.
It helps you understand and move your organization along, but it's providing the data you need to actually run it. You have to deliver, you have to figure out how to do that in order for DevOps to really matter.
I agree. Ian, you were saying something.
I think that's absolutely right. So as a Center of Excellence leader, which is who we're really talking to here, DevOps should be another part of the tooling, should be another part of how you deliver that value. So therefore, the metrics that you as a COE leader should be looking at is in terms of value delivered. Now, if you're a Center of Excellence manager, if you're a DevOps manager or development manager, you will have some other metrics about how well your part of the department works. But you shouldn't be saying, by the way, my metrics are that the entire metrics for the way you actually deliver systems. And I think that's the sometimes we get those two mixed up. People go, DevOps is actually everything you need to do to go from an idea through to delivered product. That's not true. That's called application lifecycle management. DevOps is one part of that. And I think if we focus on the metrics, which are how fast did I get a change through, that's not necessarily actually the value of delivering. And I think we need to just make sure that we're clear that you can't say a Center of Excellence leader can't look at some DevOps metrics and go, no, we got that throughput. We did 15 releases a year. Everything's great. That's not business value. That's how well that particular area of the business is working.
It's excellent point. I think I call this as a 4-legged stool. DevOps is one component. That is our 4-cylinder engine, not necessarily 6-cylinder engine in a car, but this cylinder is working very well. So now you can start, as a COE leader, you can start pinpointing where else is the problem for us to reach the business outcome. The COE leader should focus not only if the DevOps is working well, you have all the tools and you're able to meet the expectation of the industry standards. Now you should start looking at other aspects of your business, whether it is a problem with the stakeholders, they're not giving the right requirements and all the areas that you can identify, then you can start seeing the end result. So it's a journey, it's a maturity. Certainly we will, let's go to the next topic, the benefits, right? So there are some hard numbers released by Capado. Thanks to Capado here. They do a good job of getting some survey out and start publishing it. And I'm impressed with the way they put things together. And so here, shorter lead time, more deployments, fewer production failures, and faster time to recover. Once again, when I read this, Ian and Vern, these are numbers, and these are certainly, these things vary from company to company.
Mhm.
Not all companies will have exact results, right? So 4 times shorter lead time. It is companies who are optimize these processes and everything else fall in place. That's when you see this kind of outcome. So it's a good a good metrics for you as a COE leader or even a DevOps leader for you to measure against your outcome or output against what is published in the industry. So what do COE leaders should pay attention to this kind of metrics? Do they have to be concerned if they don't meet these numbers? Hey, I've been doing everything right, but I'm not meeting the numbers. What should they do to fix this, or where could things go wrong?
Well, first of all, I don't think these are Center of Excellence numbers. These are DevOps team
right.
numbers.
Oh, absolutely.
So you've got, I mean, as a DevOps, so the first 2 numbers, shorter lead time and more deployments, are some great numbers about how quickly how effective the machine is at churning out changes. Okay, whether they are the right changes or not, different issue. I think the second 2 numbers are really important, which is how many times do we roll out and then we have a production failure, as in things went wrong which we didn't see, unforeseen problems, and then how fast can we recover? As a Center of Excellence leader, those numbers are really concerning, because if those numbers are anything greater than 0, then they're putting my business at risk. I mean, they are the fact we even have to have numbers to say how many times did we break stuff and then how quickly can we get ourselves out of trouble. Those numbers should be measured as decimal points or even 0. And as a Center of Excellence leader thinking about delivering value to the business, those numbers should be 0. It doesn't matter how high the left-hand numbers are if those numbers are climbing. So there's a balance here. That's the governance versus agility. The left is agility, the right is governance.
Great.
So we just need to balance those. But then we need some Center of Excellence metrics, which is about systems adoption. Are the things we're building being used by our end users, our customers, and are they delivering the value expected? Which means we need to worry about what's being fed into the machine, into DevOps. So I think there's some high-level metrics to sit on top of that. But to answer your question, which is, as a Center of Excellence leader, what should I be worried about? I think it's the relative balance. If the left-hand numbers are going up, but the right-hand numbers are going up as well, we should be concerned. We need to be looking at how we keep the right-hand numbers low, and then make the left-hand numbers as high as possible without incurring production failures, rollbacks, and so on.
I hear you. I think it's a journey. You may not get 4 times in the first year. Maybe it takes 2-3 years for you to get to the 4 times and 46 times. But you need to be able to start measuring quarter over quarter or month over month, whatever that cadence that you have. You should be able to demonstrate, hey, I invested money and it is improving. And if you are still 2 years down the road, you are still doing 3 deployments per year after the tool. There are people, I'm pretty sure you can do that, right? You can do 3 deployments per year. Next year, do the same. The following year, maybe the tool is working, the process is working, but you are not setting the right expectation. So it's a good way. When you you have anything to add to it?
No, I think just that these are the DORA metrics, the traditional DORA metrics that can be measured with some products like AutoRabbit and so forth. And they're I see them, again, to kind of reinforce our previous points. These are just indicators on the dashboard of how I'm running my business.
Gotcha.
It's the instrumentation. It's helping us understand what's happening in that part of the area, but it's not contextually super relevant. It's got to be in a context like how Ian was describing about overall application management.
Got it. Thank you. So let's move on to the next topic in the interest of time, the DevOps challenges. So when I look at this particular slide, once again, thanks to Capado, most challenging part of integrating customer feedback. I think, in my opinion, the reason why this challenge even exists, many companies do not prioritize their stakeholders right. So if you have to prioritize your customers come first, end users, development community or the DevOps community, and then the leaders and the execs and so on. But a lot of times the companies, the leaders I want this particular feature in next release. How soon can you get it done? Oh, no problem. The BAs will go write the stories and it goes into the next sprint planning and boom, it goes there. So I think, in my opinion, by looking at this, the biggest challenge, at least I have experienced it, because the requirements from the leadership override the requirements from the customers or the end users for whatever reason. I don't want to go into the details of what the reason is, but I think that's when you get into a bigger trouble. So in the main reason why we have this issue, because we do not prioritize the requests that come from the sources. It should be from customer and so on and so forth, the end users. That's what we talked about. So my question, or where I need your help in understanding, I think, number one, difficult in getting clear requirements upfront. User acceptance testing is not well defined. So I would like to see the connection between these two. What does this mean? So if you could help me to understand, maybe I can take this to my workplace and say, hey, what's going on here at the step one and step two? Anybody wants to give your perspective?
Let me jump in there. I mean, I think this is what we talked about at the very beginning, which is DevOps can deliver stuff fast, but unless you're clear about what you should be building, which is what this first bar is, if we're not clear on the requirements, and the second bar naturally follows, because the thing I'm testing against is a set of requirements. So if actually I haven't got a clear set of requirements, then when I built it, how on earth can I test against it? And I'd actually, the issue is not DevOps. This is not DevOps' problem.
Sure.
This actually, DevOps is building what they're building, and the previous slide talks about the metrics of building a really efficient machine. This is about how do we get the business or work with the business around business analysis to give clear user stories that are unambiguous, with enough context so the developers understand what's required, at the same time as having an understanding about the risk of making those changes, so it can be the right level of resource around testing or development can be applied to it. And I would say that the big push over the last maybe 5-10 years away from waterfall, which was a very slow and laborious approach, to go, don't worry, we've got low code and we've got agile, so don't worry about the requirements, we'll just build it. If it's not right, we'll just have another go at building it. Is completely flawed. I mean, it's fine as prototyping, but we shouldn't confuse prototyping with development of strategic applications. And the rush to go, let's start building, is, I'm afraid Salesforce just pushes that all the time. Don't worry, you can build it in 2 days. The answer is you could build it in 2 days, but if you took a day and a half to understand what you really want, you could build it in half a day. If you just build it in 2 days, you're probably going to have to rebuild it, so it's going to take you 4 days in total. So that I think we need to shift the emphasis back to let's spend time understanding what you need rather than rushing to build things. And I'm just as guilty. I'm there going, oh, I think I know what you need. I'll go and start building it. Where we actually need to bite our tongues and go, no, let me be really clear about what we're trying to do here. Why are you trying to make those changes? Exactly how has the business process changed? Okay, I get that. What other requirements have we not thought about based on what you've just said? And I'm really gratified that finally we've got a business analysis certification that Salesforce launches. In fact, Monday is the first day that people can take that certification. Suddenly there's a validation that actually business analysis is really important. Well architected, same thing. Architecture is all about the stuff you do before you start building. The whole user design certification, the stuff you do before you start building. So Salesforce, I think, has recognized that there's a whole bunch of stuff that needs to happen before you start building. And I think it's been difficult for them because they've always gone, we're about building. And they've realized that now they're a strategic application. They've got to focus people's effort on making sure we build the right thing, the analysis, so that then DevOps can build the thing right.
Completely agree. I think it's very nicely, if you see the middle of our work is prioritized based on the leadership request rather than the ND request. It's a common challenge that I've seen. In fact, I was on a call today. A similar situation happened, and I have to take a step back and say, no, this is something that we should look at the process. Every time a request comes in, you need to see, okay, you are putting this request over other requests. So what can you do to help us to reprioritize the entire workload that we have? That one question always puts the leadership back onto track and say, okay, I have 10 other things to do. Now I'm asking you to do this. Instead of me going through the process of reviewing the 10 other requests and reprioritizing, I don't have time. Let's put this in the right order. You help us to prioritize it. I think that's where the customer request always takes the priority, and then not necessarily always the right priority, but you have to keep that as a high priority. Okay, I think we are also running out of time. So
my quick cynical comment on this as a management consultant is that these are all signs of a sick organization.
I can understand that part.
Well, you may say that, but actually, I think you'll find these are signs of pretty much every organization. And
that's what I meant.
The fact that Salesforce has been a low-code app and it's been citizen developed and all of those things, I think what we're seeing is Salesforce is having to unwind a lot of that and put in place some of the DevOps practices, the application lifecycle practices that you probably you'd find in Oracle and SAP. Salesforce
exactly.
It's an enterprise application. People go, oh, this is new and exciting. Kind of not. It's stuff we've known about forever.
It's that split I was focusing on earlier. Why DevOps is those people have got a reason to make sure that you don't screw up the app with low code silliness.
Yes, absolutely.
So we have 2 minutes left. So we are almost there. So when we look at application lifecycle management, we all know all 5 buckets are not equal. And we know the planning is always more important. We spend more time in planning, and coming up with a good plan takes care of a lot of other issues. And so if you have to give one takeaway from this, from each one of you, what would that be? I'd start with Vern.
Well, for me, the thing that's happening, the actual attention is on the release aspect and how that impacts test and emergent test. And the thing that's not happening enough is the planning. So my final comment, I think, to the COE leaders is, let's make space for planning. Let's invest in application lifecycle management. If getting out of the muck means that you don't have the resources to do that, there's no hope for it. Well, as leadership, let's think about fixing that so that we can figure out if we're making the right thing and how much benefit it's getting us.
Thank you. What about you, Ian?
I don't think this slide is application lifecycle management. I think this slide is DevOps. which is a part of application lifecycle management. I think this represents the amount of DevOps planning you need to do, not what you do in terms of the overall application lifecycle management.
I agree with you on that.
Which we need a lot of that, which is not represented here.
Agreed. And oftentimes so we are also, so if you remember something that I want to share, like 10 years ago, we would have the sticky pad on a big whiteboard. We just go write everything and put a sticky board. I mean, all the sticky pads, and take small pieces and come up with a journey. So we create a journey for a customer journey or whatever that journey you want. And then the agile world is also putting a lot of pressure to deliver faster. So what I have noticed the lifecycle management, the journey that we create, the agile methodologies that we have today, the companies have to look at all of them together, not just look at lifecycle management. Companies spend a lot of time to create processes, but oftentimes you create processes, they don't even look at the processes. Once it's created, they put it in a repository. So something that I want the COE leaders to look at that. So in the interest of the time, okay, if you are a COE leader, what is my action list? My action list as a COE leader, certainly I need to have a process, tools, the right tools. And I also need the right education. I might have a process and the tools. If I don't have an education, it doesn't make any sense. And be scientific about your success, measuring your success, and then certainly write KPIs. So we don't have a lot of time to get into the KPIs. So the question for Ian, platform like yours, application lifecycle ALM platform that your company developed, how does this help in the DevOps community?
I'll be brief. I mean, we're all about providing the platform for business analysis to make sure that what gets delivered as a user story and the supporting information, the processes, the RDs, the application diagrams, the documentation, the org analysis, we want to make sure that gets passed into DevOps correctly, so that they can do a great job. So I think that's our role in life, which is at the front end of DevOps, to make sure that DevOps can do a great job, do what they do, but actually see the benefits of it because they're building the right stuff. So if DevOps is building the thing right, we're about making sure you build the right thing. Okay. And we're seeing the benefits you get from that are huge. 80% reduction in rework because you're building the right stuff. 50% reduction in terms of the time it takes to analyze a user story, to understand, build the statement of work. So those sorts of things we're really applying some of that, some engineering to the business analysis piece, the same way as someone like Gearset has applied engineering to DevOps.
Thank you for sharing, Ian. I agree, and I have a lot of perspective on that, but we are certainly running out of time. So Vern, as an industry analyst, as an expert, if somebody comes to you and say, you know what, how can you help in evaluating my current environment and see where I stand with respect to other folks in the industry or other companies in the industry? Is there something that you can help the COE leaders to evaluate and provide a score or a feedback or a discovery report?
Sure. So I have a consulting service where I'd be happy to analyze the performance of an organization according to a factor analysis that I've established for DevOps platforms. So we can use that factor analysis to either look at one company and see how it matches with your needs, or we could look at, if you're doing a roundup or a beauty pageant of trying to make a selection with multiple vendors, then we can create a factor analysis just for you. So that is, I think I've got a lot of data on comparing all the vendors, but I don't, it's only effective on a case-by-case basis. So
Thank you, Vern. Jack and Anna, thank you for providing your input. I did notice that. I appreciate sharing that. As we are running out of time, first of all, thank you everyone for joining. Special thanks to Ian and Vern for giving your time. If you have any questions, you can reach out to them directly. And this is a completely volunteer-based organization. We are trying to bring people together so that the COE leaders get the benefit of not going through the pain that I went through and some of the COE leaders going through or they went through in the past. So that's the objective here, to help the COE leaders make their life a little bit easier. The takeaway for me as a COE leader, and also talking to other COE leaders, you are not here to put the tools in place, not processes in place, the guidelines for your governance. You are here to help your company transform the way they sell, market, and provide service to the customers. That's your role, not to reduce number of admins, reduce number of sandboxes. That's the initial foundational platform you have to build. As a COE leader, in my opinion, by talking to the leaders from the industry within my organization, are you helping to transform? You are not here to just build the tools, the processes. Oh, everything is working great. No. What is the bottom line that you can have a conversation with your top level executives and show them this is how it should be run? Because we are, especially the Salesforce is a platform which is to help your business grow, solve the business problems. So that's how I look at it. If you have any questions, you are welcome to reach out to us directly through LinkedIn. Vernon, Velu, and Ian, these are the folks that are on the panel today. Thank you all for joining, and enjoy your rest of the day.